asked me to talk about the future of fintech. Right now, theoretically, I don't know anything about this, and also theoretically, none of us else do, because every time I've tried to predict the future, it's always been terribly wrong. Because by now, I should have been driving a flying car or something like that. So, who the hell am I? I'm basically, typically, I'm a user designer consultant, user experience designer consultant. But over the years, I've found that that's been like a very misleading term, user experience design, and people tend to just not understand what that is. So I basically just describe myself as company designer. So I design businesses, I design companies, and I've advised various startups for that matter. In the past, I worked with Lloyd's banking group on Money Manager. I worked with American Express Innovation Labs, or even worked with eBay, Nando's, Wine Candy. I've never held a permanent job, so I've always been freelancing and working for my own business, basically. My strategy has always been to look at the entire sort of range of industries and understand how, for example, insurance might correlate with finances, or e-commerce, or even gaming or tech industry. Because I wanted to see kind of the commonalities amongst these industries. Currently, my core client is a company called Rolly that design hardware and software music instruments. It's a very interesting startup. It's a bit of a darling of UK startups. And for all intents and purposes, I'm trying to design their business. And typically, what people would think of UX as doing is wireframing, but typically we find ourselves wireframing all day long, but not knowing what the hell we're wireframing for. Or even sometimes people, and don't ever do this, don't hire a Photoshop person to do design for your products and services, because that's called lipstick on a pig, and they're just basically designing like surface and don't have a clue like what the hell they're designing. So what is actually design? Design is actually defined as how things work, and I wish that was my definition of design, but it isn't. It's actually, can anyone guess who defined this design definition? Anyone? I'll give you 3 tries. Someone has to try. No? Good guess?
Pitlow.
No, good guess?
Henry Ford.
No, it's actually Steve Jobs. So at Apple, they don't use the word design because it's a very loaded word, and typically people, people sort of misuse it. And if you say design, if I say I'm a designer, people think like I'm an interior designer, or I design like windows in shops or something like that. Design is actually how things work. That's the ultimate sort of way we should think about design. So bear that in mind as I do the rest of this talk. So how do we go about designing everything that we design? We use personas and market insights, the research, company mission and purpose and principle-driven design. We analyze the demand and customer life cycle. Storytelling. Storytelling is extremely important because it gives us the long-term ability to attract people to the proposition of the company. And yes, there's quality products underpinning that and so on. But this notion of behavioral economics is incredibly important in every industry that I worked at. So you're probably thinking now, like, what the hell is this got to do with like future of fintech, right? But just bear with me. So these things are incredibly important for every single business I've ever worked at. And what I've realized is that when I join a business and someone says to me, all right, Jason, we need a new website, for example, or our website has proven to be terrible at doing X, Y, Z, so we need a new website. Or people have told us we need an iOS app. Okay, the first thing I hear in that is probably you don't need that, or you probably need it, but in some completely different way to what you imagine. So I try to take everything away from the product and much more higher into the company sort of proposition. So instead of designing journeys, I look at the entire customer life cycle. Now, again, this is not a diagram that unfortunately, I haven't designed this diagram myself. It's actually from something like KPMG, just a standard life cycle of a customer, which you can pick up from like any sort of good management degree. So people just first become aware of a company or a proposition, right? Typically experienced designers or designers of any kind will be designing this experience here, right? But to get people into the actual experience of a company, you have to go through all these steps that people have to, the humans, the customers, have to go through all these steps to actually get into the experience. And even if it's free, typically people need to register to actually experience the product or a service. So actually take it all the way back to this awareness, research, and comparison, and how people decide the selection, how they make the selection of a product or service, how they go through the purchase cycle. Everything needs to be fun, interesting, dynamic, different, hopefully, and unique, and so on. And then they experience it, and hopefully, you get, not hopefully, but you design this, so you get them to become loyal customers so that they can become your marketing force. So you don't actually have to do marketing, you just get your customers to do your marketing for you, because they know best, right? And actually at American Express Innovation Labs, they called this whole process closing the loop, because American Express, however much you like them or hate them, they actually have something that's very, very unique to them, which is that they connect their card members with their merchants, and they're actually able to track entire data flow throughout this whole journey and understand which card member bought what, at what location, for how much, with which card, at which merchant, when, and so on. And that's very, very powerful big data set that can drive further engagement and drive through this loop and the word of mouth. So that's actually a very big sort of learning lesson in fintech world directly that I took out, and actually love this idea of closing the loop, because it's looking at the entire life cycle of the customer and remembering that if you're just designing the experience, you failed, okay? You failed miserably. And there's a lot of companies that design the experience and even some of these steps, but that's still not good enough because the customers are looking for something even better than that. So typically if you're doing a startup, you might think that you know what the customers want, but actually you don't know. So what you can do is you can deploy human-centered design principles, where you look at like all humans. Typically, like working class people go to 9 to 5 to a job and all this kind of contextual constants, as I call them. And then you can just use them as an inspiration to design your initial product. But hopefully you can get some users to get some user-centered design, which is users who are not paying you the money, to actually get into your product, into your service, into your business, and track to see how they work. So at that point, you might be at the point where you think you know how things work, but hopefully some of them start paying even some notional money for what you're doing, and then you hopefully definitely know what people are willing to pay, and you can iterate further on that and make it a success story. And so you have to do this iterative learning process. So it's very, very simple thing of who's the customer, what is the product, and why would they pay for it, and vice versa. What value are we giving to the customer through what sort of product, and who are those people that we're giving that to. So the next big trend is actually a designed company. So you can't be just designing your product or a service. You have to design everything inside your company so that it all joins up as one unified proposition. So I've spoken to some people here in terms of how do you recruit people into a new startup in London, for example, where there's so much competition, there's so many good jobs, etc., etc. Well, if you design your company, then people want to join that company for its mission, purpose, for nice design, for sense of belonging, etc., etc. So that's your next big trend in every industry. It's not just in fintech, it's in every industry. And actually, everything that other industries are doing will impact on fintech, because people, as like what I call human animals, with people that have like common needs and objectives in the world. We all need to live and breathe and see our children hopefully eventually sometime, not just work. They'll tend towards the services and businesses that are designed. that are designed to make them happy, to fulfill their needs, etc., etc. So what you want to have is an embedded organizational UX where user experience design is understood and practiced by executives, managers, and the workers. So your salespeople are UX designers because they can feed back into the loop. Your developers are UX designers because if they're doing shoddy work, the product's not going to work, it's going to crash, it's going to impact on experience. Your ops people are experience designers because often you'll hear, process is design. Support people certainly because, when products fail, you can actually get people back on track with support. Recently I had some problems with Mercedes-Benz and they gave us, instead of A-Class, they gave us C-Class as a courtesy car for a week, absolutely free of charge. We're now thinking of buying C-Class because you got used to it so much, etc., etc. So this is the future of fintech, a designed company. And so if you ever think like, why is it that so many companies fail? Well, it's simply because for most part, people going into business, and I've sort of seen this with so many times, the failures are not designed. And these ones that are kind of like on the edge have maybe good designed like processes, products and services, but not everything. And the ones that are designed are the Apples of this world, and even Google, who would say they're a tech-led company, but they actually design everything. They design the lunch experience, they give employees, the laundry for free, etc., etc. It's all part of company design. And that's why people stick around working at Google for relatively cheap rates still compared to next place. So what's next? If you want to know how to do this, you can book a weekend with me for somewhere between £2,000 to £5,000, and I'll tell you exactly how you can go about doing that. And that's my email address. So thank you very much. Questions?
Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions for Jason?
Would you go all the way for 2,000 to 5,000?
That would be a beautiful
yes.
goal.
Simple answer is yes. But seriously, to give you an example, I've advised startups that have actually, off the back of the work that I've done for them, for quite literally a couple of weeks, they've raised like £1.5 million. And they've actually taken their proposition from what was an enormous kind of seemingly really interesting proposition to a very small but focused and concentrated proposition that they were able to build and then raise money off the back of that, which takes them into the next round of build and growth and so on. So if you spend, typically you take a UX designer for like 2 months and they'll just constantly design products for you, but what you actually need is a design company. And most people can't think this way.
Do you connect startups with investors?
Yes.
Actually,
Yeah. Ask me some like why questions.
Why do you connect startups?
Okay. I often ask people a question quite openly. I said, "What do you need the most?" And people get, they go, oh, "I don't know, what kind of question is that?" Well, it's basically the question of what do you need the most. And often the time people say we need money or we need more employees or whatever. And I want to know what you need the most, because if I find someone else who actually can offer that, I can connect you. And if I'm a connector, then that's good for both me and everyone else involved. So yes, I am a connector. That's why I connect people. Good question. Come on, someone else. You ask them. You go.
Will this be applicable to startups with, say, 2 or 3 man operations?
Absolutely. So, for example, you can have typically like an incumbent, like big company like Bupa. They might have this. They might be trying to do this, but people are leaving because they're just not happy, or there's competition, etc., etc. So people get constantly disrupted. The incumbents get disrupted, and startups are trying to disrupt. So this is what's happening in the world is that everyone's squabbling for this experience design thing, right? Like experience is a product. That's another thing that we're talking about American Express. And everyone's looking going, okay, that sounds good, but I don't know what it means.
Still
right?
hate it.
What's that?
Still hate American Express.
Yes.
They enjoyed your difficult second album.
Yeah. So it's a good proposition. It sounds good, but no one knows what it means. Yeah. And so, yes, if you're a small startup just starting here, yes, medium startup or medium company or an existing company. I've worked with all of them in different industries.
Most startups are already focusing on UX quite a lot anyway, so what difference does it make?
Yeah, they're focusing
what are they not
they're
doing?
focusing on user experience design across their products and services. They're not designing a company. That's what I'm saying.
Well, in that case, say if I'm going to give all my employees massages and 100 tickets, would that make a difference? Is that
It will make a difference to your employees, but it's a question of how does it make a difference to the entire you know, the diagram going through the whole loop. And there's other things like within the company that you need to take into account when you're designing it.
So when you're basically designing processes like Google does, should you think like product life cycle, the whole life cycle of how an employee works there, everything they do?
Yeah, so the thing here is that you will have this across, so typically companies don't offer just one product, they'll offer a range of products, and then this is what becomes, the life cycle becomes very, very complex potentially when you have to map it across different types of customers. So American Express, you might have crappy experience with American Express because you've had American Express VA card, because the life cycle for that card isn't very good. But if you were in like one of the bigger cards, you know, it'd be excellent. But that's not good enough these days. Yeah, that's not good enough. You have to design every product offering fully and the company around that. That's the idea, and that's the future.
How much of this is planning from day one versus kind of keep catching up? Because
so,
you know,
three things there.
yeah.
Minimum viable product. Typically nowadays, minimum viable product doesn't work because it's not good enough.
Yeah.
So you need minimum viable experience. Yeah. So that's your short-term strategy. Medium-term strategy, that is like what's the release 2 after that, or the next product that you're offering. And then long-term strategy, which is the big picture, which hopefully you would have started from beginning, that hopefully impacts not just, you know, Trafalgar Square, but it impacts, you know, large portion of the world. Because if your company proposition isn't scalable enough, realistically speaking, you probably should pivot earlier on rather than having to prove that through going through lots of these and go, oh, the market isn't big enough.
Effectively, the minimum viable experience, you may be focusing, let's say, just on number 5 and number 6. But as you grow, as you get more resources, or
no,
how do you allocate
exactly.
resources?
So
right?
typically, actually, that's what the companies would do. They'd say, oh, if we make this strong, you know, then people will come in. And so, at American Express, they'd say, like, you know, it used to be the saying, build it and they'll come. At American Express, they say, build it and they won't come, right? So you actually have to do a thin strip through this, that's minimum viable experience, and then thicken this up, hopefully, as you release through. And so that's the design of company. And also, like, there's larger thing to it, but in terms of products and services, you need to do that in a strategic way. And in every stage of this process, you need to be able to tell a story. We just released this, it's great because so that people can use the word of mouth to actually tell other people.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you.
Excellent presentation.